The prison guards tried to kill me. Thinking I was a junkie, not knowing I was undercover FBI, I showed up at Central State Correctional with fake needle marks on my arms and hair that smelled like cigarettes. My handler walked me through intake, while I twitched and shook, playing the part of a strung-out junkie perfectly. The intake officer barely glanced at me before muttering, "Another tweaker," and shoving an orange jumpsuit across the counter. He told me I was headed to cell block D, infamous because 14 inmates had died there in just 6 months. All of it ruled as overdoses or suicides. I had one rule: don't let anyone find the wire hidden in my shoe. Officer Sanchez grabbed my arm hard and announced to the others, "Junkies always cause problems. This one's already shaking." My trembling worked in my favor. It covered any real nervousness while I gathered evidence about what was really happening in that block. The processing area smelled like bleach and hopelessness. During the strip search, Sanchez shoved me into the wall and laughed when I stumbled. Officer Kent joined in, saying, "Put him in the junkie cell. Let Lamar deal with him." They sent me to the worst cell in D block, a grimy concrete box with stains on the walls. My cellmate Carlos whispered that the last 3 guys who had my bunk didn't last a month. They owed, he said, making air quotes. But they weren't even drug users. At dinner, it became clear the guards treated D block like a dumping ground. While the rest of the prison got decent food, we got leftovers, if anything at all. Sanchez walked the food line, kicking trays away from inmates who tried to take them. When I reached for a piece of bread, he stomped on my hand and sneered, "Did I say you could eat?" The wire in my shoe caught every word. The next morning, I saw the real operation. During count, Sanchez and Kent pulled 2 inmates claiming it was for medical evaluations, but instead of taking them to the infirmary, they led them into a storage room. For 20 minutes, I heard screams. By lunch, the bunks were empty. The IE, official story. Heart attacks. They preyed on the vulnerable, addicts with no family, mentally ill prisoners, anyone they thought wouldn't be missed. Sanchez liked to taunt inmates who needed medication, holding it just out of reach, and telling them to beg for it. When someone collapsed from withdrawal, he'd step over them and call it natural selection. Kent was worse. He made rounds after lights out with a flashlight and baton, pulling out the weakest inmates. Some came back beaten and silent. Some never came back at all. By day 4, they turned their attention to me. Sanchez noticed I wasn't going through severe withdrawal. "You're faking," he accused, yanking me from my cell and slamming me against the wall. He pressed his baton to my throat and snarled, "You'll be begging for a fix by tomorrow." They put me on suicide watch, a freezing, empty cell with a camera that conveniently broke when guards came in. That's when Kent brought in Officer Davis, a massive man with a cruel grin. Sanchez told him, "Show him what happens to tough guys in D block." Davis slammed my head into the wall, demanding to know where my stash was. When I told him I didn't have one, he kicked my ribs over and over, careful not to leave obvious marks. That night, I saw their cruelty up close. An 18-year-old inmate named Tommy started seizing from withdrawal. Instead of calling medical, Sanchez and Kent stood there taking bets on how long he'd last. 15 minutes later, Kent finally went in, not to help, but to plant drugs in Tommy's pocket. "Another overdose," he announced. Kent even kept tally marks on his locker, 23 by my count. On day 6, it was my turn. Sanchez dragged me into the same storage room I'd seen other inmates taken to. Syringes lined the wall. He filled one with a clear liquid and said, "You know what's funny about junkies? They'll shoot up anything, even if they don't want to." Kent held me down while Sanchez stepped closer, practicing the fake cause of death out loud. Another tragic overdose. If only he'd accepted help. That's when the doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Someone had tipped them off about corrupt prison guards, and I had just lived through enough to prove it. Full story on the channel. Link below. Click now and watch what happened next.